Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com.
And listeners like you who support us on Patreon or Substack, sign up for exclusive benefits at patreon.com/ihearofsherlock or ihearofsherlock.substack.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 309, Holmes in an Hour or Two.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now, here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder.
Oh, thank you so much, Bill Curtis. As always, it's an honor to get an introduction from you, and welcome everyone to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, are you ready to knock this episode out in an hour or two?
Yours, mine, and ours. It's all fine. It's all one thing to me. Help yourself.
Well, we've only got time. That's the only thing we've got. And the same amount, too. The great equalizer. Well, we have a lovely show for you today. We've got a number of things lined up, including an interview with the recently 221B conned Brad Keefauver, talking about his book, Holmes in an Hour or Two, and the Sherlockian Chronologist Guild handbook, and the guild itself. So for those of you who are interested in chronology or just how this takes part in our little corner of the hobby world, you'll be interested to stay tuned for this interview with Brad. We've also got the Learned Societies, where we talk about what events are going on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, and, of course, the Canonical Couplet. I should note that our friend Madeline Quinones, who does A Chance of Listening, which is a review of Sherlockian podcasts, she's on a bit of a hiatus, having traveled herself to 221BCon, and we're more than happy to give her a rest since she's been working extraordinarily hard on our behalf in these audio waves. So we'll say hello to Madeline when she comes back on episode 310. Meanwhile, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that on Patreon or Substack. You pick whatever works for you. You can go to patreon.com/ihearofsherlock or ihearofsherlock.substack.com. We got links in the show notes to both of those. For as little as $1 a month, you can support what we do here. That'll get you access to bonus content from our archives. And if you do it on Patreon, well, of course, you get a choice of thank you gifts at certain levels. So we do encourage you to do that. And this is all in service of what we do in the world of Sherlock Holmes. So thank you in advance, whether you're a paying member or just a regular listener. We're happy to have you here, and invite other people along for the journey. Tell them what this is all about and turn them on to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Oh, that stately music can mean only one thing. It is time for us to learn about the Learned Societies. Bert, where do we find ourselves in the middle of May?
The middle of May. It's a busy day, Saturday, May 17. So much going on in virtual and person-to-person meetings. Skokie, Illinois. There'll be a meeting of the Carlton Criterion Bar Association, a luncheon meeting. In Nashville, Tennessee, the Nashville Scholars of the Three-Pipe Problem are having their luncheon meeting. Contact for that is Jeff Stewart. You can find all these, of course, as we've said, on Sherlockiancalendar.com if you want to send an email to some of these people. On Saturday, again, the 17th, New York, the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes are having their gala spring luncheon on the east side of Manhattan at a terrific Italian restaurant. And Evie Herzog is the contact for that. But also you can go to ash.nyc.com. The Norwegian Explorers have a virtual meeting of their study group. Tom Gottwalt is the contact for that. More at norwegianexplorers.org. That's also on the 17th. Not to be outdone, the illustrious clients of Indianapolis are having dinner in Indianapolis on the 17th of May. And the contact for that is Louise Haskett. And you can find out more about that on the Illustrious Clients Facebook page.
Now, what could be better than an afternoon tea with other Sherlockians? Well, afternoon tea with Sherlockians from the Sherlock Holmes Society of South Australia. Go all the way to Adelaide for tea. The Adelaide Rascals are your home for all of those events. You can find them at adelaiderascals.com. A virtual meeting on the 18th of May with the Sound of the Baskervilles. Just go to soundofthebaskervilles.com to find out more about their meeting. David Haugen's the contact. And, another in-person meeting on the 18th with the notorious Canary Trainers. You can contact Glenn Link at comicsworthreading.com/Canary Trainers. And another virtual meeting, the Tea Brokers of Mincing Lane. They're having their meeting on the 18th. And finally, look at this. The Men on the Tour and the Cornish Horrors are having a joint meeting in Waterford, Connecticut. And our contact for that is none other than Bert Wolder.
Good grief.
That sounds fun. What are you discussing that evening?
Well, I'm going to be speaking about Freddie Steele, and just for about 20 minutes, I think, giving a little overview of Steele and his work and his life. Really interesting. But there's a great program that Mike Berdan and Greg Darak and Dana Mancini and others have put together with lots of fun. So we're looking forward to that.
Good.
And then we have a virtual meeting of the Honorable Ronald Adair Las Vegas Card Room. Wow, on the 22nd of May. That sounds like a lot of fun. That's Thursday, May 22nd. Contact for that is Carolyn Coleman. And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the 24th of May, Saturday, May 24th, a in-person meeting of the Afghanistan Perceivers. And Brian Wilson is the contact for that, or you can go to tulsa-sherlock.org.
And here in Michigan, the Ribston Pippins are going to be having their dinner meeting in Royal Oak. Regina Stinson's the contact there, and they, of course, are at ribston-pippins.com. And, my goodness, if you get down to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, the White Rose Irregulars are having their meeting on the 24th. Denny Dobry is the contact there. And Bert, why don't you wrap it up with New Jersey?
Paul Hartnett, our friend Paul Hartnett, and in Middlesex Township, New Jersey, has a meeting on Wednesday, the 28th of May. All of his meetings are on Wednesday afternoon. The Middlesex Constabulary meets in Middlesex Township, New Jersey.
Perfect. Well, that is all that's going on in the second half of May in the world of Sherlockian societies, as reported by Ron Fish at the Sherlockian Calendar. If you know of something that belongs on this calendar, get in touch with Ron at Sherlockiancalendar.com. And make sure you check out all of the things throughout the year and continue to follow along with us here on the Learned Societies. For those of you who have been around here long enough, you know that the MX book of new Sherlock Holmes stories has been going on for nearly a decade, and it is now rounding out its final series with volumes 48 through 52, edited by David Markham. One of the hallmarks of the MX book of new Sherlock Holmes stories has been its constant support of Undershaw, the home of Arthur Conan Doyle for a number of years. And Undershaw, as well as being transformed into a school for children with special needs, has been the object of support by MX Publishing. The proceeds of the book collection have gone to Undershaw. We're talking over $100,000 over the last decade. And on May 17th, 2025, you can enjoy an evening with Sherlock Holmes, a virtual event that's a live stream directly from Undershaw in celebration of this 10-year anniversary and final publication date of the stories. Just go to mxpublishing.com to get your copy of the final 4 volumes in this series and to sign up through Eventbrite to attend the event. Find out all about it at mxpublishing.com. Brad Keefauver has been around the Sherlockian world for quite some time. As a matter of fact, I remember him from back in the early days of the Hounds of the Internet. But his history in writing about all sorts of interesting things in our hobby goes back to the 1980s, where he had books like The Elementary Methods of Sherlock Holmes, The Armchair Baskerville Tour, and Sherlock and the Ladies, Speculations, Musings, and Gossip. We spoke to him here recently about the monstrum opus of Sherlock Holmes, a compendium of horrors Dr. Watson dared not tell. But he's also widely known for his blog, Sherlock Peoria, which he writes on a, irregular basis. He also hosts the podcast Watsonian Weekly. And of course, he is notorious for his membership in the Sherlockian Chronologist Guild. Brad received his investiture in the Baker Street Irregulars in 1989 as Winwood Reade. Brad Keefauver, welcome back to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Well, thanks. Glad to be here.
You joined us for the very first time on episode 56, way back on 56, talking about Sherlock Peoria. And then you and Rob Nunn joined us a couple of years ago to talk about Monstrum Opus, that wonderful book of pastiches that had to do with the supernatural and monstrous. And now you're back again, and I should say it's about time.
Well, thanks.
Literally.
Happy to be back.
It
is about time.
Oh, we do what we can. Well, we want to talk to you about Sherlockian chronology. Why don't we begin at the beginning for you? Where did you begin your fascination with chronology?
Well, that's kind of funny because in my first decade as a Sherlockian back in the 80s, Magico was putting out reprints of everything in the world. And there was a point where I consciously went, this chronology stuff is too boring. I'm not buying those books. And it came to haunt me later when I would want them later. But interesting enough, at the same time, I had an article published in the Baker Street Journal that was basically about the chronology of Red-Headed League. It was comparing the dates, it was going, okay, who are we believing, Watson or Jabez Wilson in this story? So then I really stayed away from chronology until 2001 when I was the discussion leader for the Hounds of the Internet. And, that's a weekly thing. You put out questions on a story every week. And when I was doing that, I decided, since I'm walking through these stories every week, I'm going to start doing the chronology of the stories every week to go with the discussion questions. So by the time 60 weeks had passed, I'd pretty much put together a chronology, and I put it out on my Sherlock Peoria website at that time, which since I've gone to, Blogger, Google's thing, instead of the full website like I used to have. So that was really my start in chronology.
Well, how did you address that start? I mean, you weren't, what What resources did you use to figure out that early chronology?
Just the canon. I mean, and that's something I've always said, I mean, and really pushed, is that all you need to do chronology is basically the canon and maybe a perpetual calendar. Past that, it's whatever resources you can find. But that was all I used for that one, is just, going through with a perpetual calendar and the canon. And, it was very, very basic. Since then, I've learned, there are so many ways you go with chronology. And Vincent Rice came up with a deep way of looking at chronology, where you take a story and you analyze every single aspect of it, from the technology to any given thing mentioned in it that you can look up the history of. You can really go deep with chronology, and so I've learned a lot since then about how far you can go with this thing.
But what did you do when you came across things that just had no dates? Things like the Gloria Scott or the Musgrave Ritual, which is well, clearly it's an early case, because the Musgrave Ritual is Holmes at university. But then there's, Silver Blaze and Three Gables and others that just don't seem to have any date associated with them.
That's when you start just grabbing at details of the story, like, okay, is Watson married? Is there anything that ties to anything that we have a date for? And any chronologist that has done exact dates for every single story, at some point they're writing fan fiction, because there are stories where there is no evidence at all. And I will confess to one thing: I have made up an argument for When Dying Detective happened, but I literally kind of put it on my birthday just because.
Very morally-esque of you.
Yes. That's, there was precedence for that. So.
I like that.
Oh, so, gosh, there's so many different ways for us to go here. So let's talk a little bit about the Chronologists Guild.
Okay.
What is it, and how did it come together?
That's one of those things. It was like, when we were just in COVID and post-COVID, we wound up doing a lot of things we weren't doing before. And one of the things was, at some point, I was talking to Vincent Wright about stuff, and we were like, well, we should have a Sherlockian Chronologist Guild. And I thought, he said, let's get Mike McSwiggan in it. So it was basically, I'm going to just do this thing and create a PDF newsletter that we send out for our Chronologist Guild of 3 people. And because it was a topic, like, it just, I don't know, something about the fact that it seemed to be the most unpopular part of Sherlockiana just appealed to me. And it's like, well, let's make an organization that's, we'll never have any members, and it's everybody thinks it's boring, and we'll just, I didn't expect it to take off, but so that's why I just put out a monthly PDF newsletter that kind of started working through the stories, and we've gathered a few different folks have written for us over the years, in the last 4 years. And that's just how that started. It's just basically a mailing list for a PDF newsletter. And then after 4 years, we decided to have a little more fun and create a little handbook and a T-shirt. And, not many of these things exist, of course, but...
Well, how many members are you up to?
We're up to about 50 members. We do a thing like I said, when we first started this, I thought, nobody's going to want to do this. It's so weird and everything. So we said we can have public members and private members. So we have private members are people that are on the mailing list that the things are sent out blind copy, carbon copy. Nobody knows who they are. But the public members are, once you've, decided that you want to openly admit you're Sherlockian chronology minded, you can pick a member date, and then I have a list in the newsletter that comes out all the time. So between the 2 sets of members, we have about 50 right now.
Okay. And you've, as you mentioned, you put out this Chronologist Guild handbook, and Bert was at the Dayton conference and picked up a copy, and actually picked up a copy for me as well and sent it my way, for which I am eternally grateful. And it strikes me almost of a similar tone. Rob Nunn wrote the foreword for this little handbook. And he said, I must admit, chronology has never interested me that much.
Rob is not a chronologist, but he edits the newsletter for me.
Well, there you go.
And he's the assistant editor, but doesn't really care about it.
Isn't it interesting that we get a couple of guys who really weren't interested in chronology who are now involved in the Chronologist Guild?
Yeah. Well, chronology will sneak up on you. I mean, it's along the way. Let's see, about 2010, I applied for a new job, and one of the requirements of that job, you had to take a couple tests, and they wanted you to give a 10-minute presentation with some basic PowerPoint slides, just to see, how well you were at talking to people and doing things. And they say you could pick any topic you want. People have picked, how to make tacos. People have picked that. And for some reason at the time I went, I'm going to do it on Sherlockian chronology. So I walked in with three non-Sherlockians, and I prepared this presentation where I walked them through what the lure is of Sherlockian chronology, how it's done, and they thought that was the most wonderful thing they'd ever heard in terms of somebody with an analytical mind and whatever. And it helped get me this job that I currently still have.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And, when you think about it, it really, I mean, to the average reader, you don't really give it much thought. But when you step back, you say, okay, we have 60 of these stories that are considered canonical. And, there were others, the Apocrypha, which we're doing a series on the Apocrypha over on Trifles, by the way.
I picked up, you had chronology episodes that I've actually noted in my newsletter.
Oh, well, we appreciate that. We could probably do a whole chronology series over on Trifles at some point, too. We may need to confer with you on that, Brad.
Well, you don't want to chase your listeners away. I don't know how do too much. Little chronology's like seasoning, it's a little of it's good, but
yeah. But as you say, to the lay person, you present this to them, and we've got these 60 stories. They were all written in a certain order, or at least published in a certain order. But then you back out of it and you go, well, they didn't all take place chronologically as written. So it becomes a fascinating puzzle to have to piece together and to make certain parts fit to try to reason away some of the illogical things that happen or the perhaps mistakes. So when you put together this handbook, I'm curious, how do you take on certain premises? In other words, I think it was Paul Thomas Miller whose premise is Watson does not lie. That's his take on putting the chronology.
His chronology,
yeah. And I have to imagine other chronologists have other premises that they base their chronologies on. How do you piece this all together?
Well, it really is a personal choice because, I mean, Paul went, and I've had the same attitude as Paul. I go, I trust Watson fully, but, the original chronologists back in the 30s, they wanted Watson to be a proper, British gentleman and only be married one time. So to them, his monogamy was more important than the dates. They would sometimes switch a date, say, well, he wrote this date, but that's obviously wrong or a printer's error or something because he was married then. He couldn't have been saying this like he was and come up with these excuses for the dates not lining up. But Paul and I both are among the school where we follow the dates first and then let the other part sort it out. And Watson's marriage is, you think that's like your gossipy TMZ kind of, but that is such a part of the whole chronological mess is the fact that, his marriages don't line up with any kind of timeline that you can put together.
Well, and let's not forget, too, that the Sherlock Holmes stories were written by a guy who had been married twice that we know of.
That's true. Yeah, and that always intrigues me, too, because part of Sherlockian chronology is lining things up with, the actual historical facts as we know them. And it's fascinating that, it's always one of the things that's always just really fascinated me about it, even though he didn't plan it, and, Doyle didn't care about all this chronology stuff and everything. But the dates of Watson's writing lines up with, the actual publication dates in Strand Magazine. If you look at it, you've got the first two initial attempts, Studying Scarlet Sign of the Four, but Strand doesn't start publishing the short stories until after Holmes is dead at Reichenbach Falls. So suddenly, Holmes is gone. Watson is writing these stories to memorialize his friend who didn't really like him and probably didn't want him publishing anymore. So then, you have this whole hiatus when, when Holmes returns to London in 1894, suddenly the Strand stops publishing stories about him. And then the stories don't start being published again until Holmes retires. So it's just the magic of the canon and the way it interacts with reality. It's amazing.
Well, maybe we're all living on separate timelines.
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Brad, what happens, when you get into chronology and you look at the entirety of Holmes's career? How do you think that changes your appreciation for the cases and the stories and the character development and the way the friendship develops over time? And how do you think, because what happens when you look at it is that it's not a bell curve by any means. There are some very busy years for Sherlock Holmes, like 1887, and then many unbusy years. And then you can say to yourself, well, gee, maybe Watson says several times, there are a lot of cases that I'm not going to trouble my readers with because maybe they didn't have an answer, or it wasn't really a good use of Holmes's ability, and maybe it was a pedestrian case. So he gives himself a lot of outs, but you do develop, a sense of the career, don't you?
Yeah, because basically, a chronology is basically the bare bones of a life story there. You're, the whole time Holmes and Watson were together, it's laid out. And by putting it in order, you have to figure things out about, okay, what was Watson's married life like? What was the relationship between Holmes and Watson like? Some people have looked at, okay, how does the drug use fit in this timeline? Anything, once you start going down those rabbit holes, that's the thing. As you're putting the dates in, you start going, wandering down these rabbit holes. One of the things I looked at early on was, as you go through the cases, Holmes' attitude towards women changes along that. As you, lay him into the timeline, where eventually he's trusting Kitty Winter to go with him. And that didn't turn out real well, but quite different from early on when he was saying women are never to be trusted early in the stories.
Does chronology ever leach over from the published cases to the unreported cases? The reason I ask is that I did some work myself on the unreported cases just to count them all. And I came up with a number of 107 unreported cases, which you can certainly debate about. But this is, everything from the Abergavenny murder to, Woodhouse, or an elderly woman, or Wilson, the notorious canary trainer. So that's the A to Z there. But when you do that and think about just the unreported cases, the tired captain, the Sultan of Turkey, Archie Stamford, all the things Watson mentions that you never find out anything about, then you're at the point of saying, well, wait a second, when did we first hear about this? Yeah. And what time did that case take place? But then when was it published too? The case may have taken place, in 1879, but the story was published in 1893, so Watson is mentioning the case in 1893, not when the actual case happened in 1870, blah, blah, blah. Does that ever bump up to people's frame of reference?
thorough chronologists have laid the unpublished cases into their timelines, where they use, okay, at what point was it mentioned? How is it mentioned? Whatever, and try to insert it into their timeline in terms so that, I've seen timelines where it's all the cases that, I can't think of who the last, because I just saw one like that, but I know one person who has gone over and above on it is David Markham, who not only has his own personal chronology, he's never published it, but he's inserted the unpublished cases. He's inserted every pastiche he's ever read into that timeline somehow. He's apparently has a big fat notebook where he tries to put everything into one great order, which I don't know how that's even possible, but that's what he says he does. So
the imagination is a wonderful thing.
It is. It definitely is.
Talk a little bit about the rabbit holes, because it's the rabbit holes that sometimes people hear that, going down this rabbit hole and they say, boy, that must be awful. But no, it's not. I mean, that's really part of the attraction here, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and there's all sorts of, there's the major rabbit holes of the marriage. Then there's the little ones like electricity. When was electricity put on at a certain part of London? And when is it mentioned in the story that somebody had electric lights? So then you suddenly get into this whole rabbit hole of studying, okay, how did electricity come into play across London and, in neighborhoods? And, sometimes people get into things like, Eric Skase, is it, that was talking in Minneapolis at the last conference there? He did that whole thing about telegraphy. Yeah. And he wound up in the Chronologist Guild after that talk, because everybody in that room that was a chronologist was like, hey, you're hitting all our buttons here with the, development of telegrams and using it to make the timeline of this story work.
Yeah. For our listeners, we should say that what Eric did there was, there are events in the Sherlockian world where we learn that a character in a far distant place sent a message to London. And one day Eric said to himself, I wonder how that would have traveled. Where was the telegraph office, and where were the lines, and how was it relayed, and how many points of relay were they, and how long would it have taken? Would it have taken a day or 3 days or a week, or how'd that work? And he charted all the undersea cables, all the wires, all the offices from point A to point B, and it was really quite a presentation.
Yeah, it's one of those. And those rabbit holes are what make this. I mean, you can make chronology as complicated as you want to make it, or as simple as you want to make it. One of the things I did a couple years back at 221 BCon, where I'm speaking to you from this weekend, actually, was I got it in my head that if you put the few basic facts about each story on a card, you could make a 60-card deck and then just start laying out those cards and make yourself a timeline in a very short time. I mean, it wouldn't be perfect. It might not have all the details, but you could whip one together. And I actually printed up these little decks of cards, 60 cards, and brought them down here to 221 BCon. And we had a seminar where everybody laid it out. And, the first cards you lay down are Study in Scarlet, Last Bow, Final Problem, Empty House. And then you, bit by bit, you start looking at the things on the cards and placing them in an order. And, you can get a basic timeline together in a fairly short time. If, the thing that's always taken the time is, part of the thing of putting it in the cards. And I did this in my workbook, Holmes in an Hour, for chronologists. Because basically, if you just take the raw information, just the basic raw information, Watson's dates he gives, the seasons, any other little important things, you can scrunch that down to pretty much one card. And that's why I made the deck that way. So you could just look at the basic fact, because what people have always done is you read the whole canon one story at a time, read the whole story, pick out every single point. But if somebody went ahead and picked out some of the basics for you, like I did on those cards, then you don't really, the time is in the reading the whole canon. Well, in the fun too, of course, but you can do it a little quicker if you just have the raw data to work with.
That's fascinating. So this deck of 60 cards, is this something that you just made for yourself? Is it something that is commercially available to other Sherlockians?
actually I made just a PDF that you could print out and then cut it yourself.
Okay.
Which I printed at the local Kinko's and then, used a paper cutter and made the decks that I brought down here. And I sent that PDF with the monthly newsletter for the Sherlockian Chronologist Guild at the time. I just sent it out to everybody. So, it's everybody, people that wanted to could print it out. And I think somebody got fancy and printed it out on, you could print it out on fancier paper or, something they do with menus at Kinko's if you really wanted to get nice with it. But yeah, was the way I did it. I just made fantastic. It on a nice. Yeah.
And I suppose for the more enterprising among Sherlockians, if you wanted to sit down with friends, whether it's at 221 Beacon or just at a Scion meeting or what have you, and play a game of poker with these cards, you could blow a hole in the space-time continuum with a full house.
That's true. That would be good. I'm curious to see what makes a full house. I guess a full house would be like if you had a matching set from the adventures that were in order, or how that.
Watson's Marriages.
Watson's Marriages.
And a couple of sure dates, yeah.
Because that was the thing about the cards. I put different graphic elements on them to denote, Watson was married in this case, or he wasn't married in this case, and kind of tried to count for that too. So yeah, you could come up with a very crazy card game out of those.
But the fun never ends here. So you mentioned your workbook, Holmes in an Hour or Two. What is that?
That is kind of what I said with the cards, where I thought about, everybody's these chronology books that have come out over the years. There's a dozen of them where everybody walks you through, okay, here's what I found in the stories, and here's why I say this date is that date. And like I said with the cards, I kind of went, hey, every single one of these guys is going over the same information every single time. So if you took that basic information that every single chronologist is using and just put that in a book or in a deck of cards or whatever, so that somebody could just read that same information and then make their own judgments. So I thought, I'm just going to make a workbook for people to just be able to hit the highlights and kind of get an idea of when they think each story occurred. So then in the workbook, I took each story and went, okay, here's like a page of the basic facts from that story that involve chronology. And then, gave some blanks for the people to write in their stuff. I mean, I put a thing early on in the book where I encouraged them to write in the book, where I said, sign your name on this line to say you're going to write in this book and work it, and not, make it collectible by your own work instead of just going, I'm not going to ruin this book. So, yeah, I just wanted to try and see how quickly you could, if you just had the basic facts, how quickly you could put a timeline together. I was hoping to get it so you could do it in an hour. I tried doing it myself with the book that I wrote, and I couldn't do it in an hour, so I had to say Holmes in an hour or two.
Well, that's fair enough. Hours and hours of fun for budding chronologists.
It's enough to get you intrigued, because the thing about chronology, and this is something way back when I did that little short presentation on it, that I realized is Doyle set a trap for us. Because if you just start with the adventures and go on the first one, Scandal here, here's a date. It occurred in March 20th, 18th. I forget what the exact date, but an exact date right in the front of the story. Next story, I think you get another. It's like, as you work through it, he gives you just enough up front. You're thinking, I can put these in order. This is easy. And then as you work your way through the adventures, it gets more complicated and more complicated. But by then you're invested. And, it's the trap.
So as you think about the major chronologists who have kind of paved the way before us, whether they were wayward or whether they were tried and true, who are the significant ones that stand out to you, and who, as far as legendary chronologists, whose chronology do you prefer?
Oh, well, I've always been a big fan of Ernest Bloomfield Zeisler, because he was the first chronologist to use other chronologists. Where, there's a little bit of mentioning, but he looks at every chronologist that came before him. He actually, in his chronology book, actually lists them in there, and then makes his own arguments and says, well, I don't think this person was right or that person was right. So, his work, in the late 50s. His late 50s. I don't have my timeline in front of me, but he was important. He was one of the key ones that I got in on really quickly because he went so deep. The one that always gets me is Kerry Cummings, the guy that did the biorhythmic. He only made it through the first two novels and Adventures and Memories, but he was using that old pseudoscience of biorhythms and charting Holmes' physical and emotional biorhythms and how they lined up with, and using that to try and, he used the other data too, but then he would use that to try and place stories, which is just a unique, it's like, nobody's done that kind of thing. It's like, there's
for a reason.
Yeah, for a good reason. And he wasn't even able to finish the canon. So, yeah, I just like that one because, his is so different. But.
Yeah, we should tell our listeners, if you've never heard of biorhythm, it's the idea that based on the time and day you were born, that there are different rhythmic cycles of emotional well-being and cognitive ability and physical strength that perpetuate at different days, a 23-day physical cycle and so on and so forth. But tying that to the chronology of Sherlock Holmes is amazing.
Yeah, and, it's interesting because in our timeline that we have in our newsletter of chronologists and chronology, we've got, I refer to like the Conan Doyle era and then the Golden Age, Silver Age. Now we're in the, basically the internet age where, there's people doing chronologies out on the internet that are Sherlockians that, are outside of our traditional Sherlockian venues and stuff. And then there's, it seems like we had kind of in the last 10 years, we've had a good surge of people. There's been like 3 or 4 new chronology books out there between Bruce Harris and Paul Thomas Miller and last name's Copo. I can't remember his first name, but yeah, he came out with a big one too.
Now, if people would, we'll have links to obviously where people can get the book Holmes in an hour or two. But if people want to join the Chronologist Guild, where should they go?
Just email me. That's the best way to do it. It's bkeefauver@gmail.com, and that I'll hook them up because it's totally no dues. I send out a PDF newsletter. That's the whole thing of the guild.
Easy enough.
Hooray.
Yeah.
And we should also mention in passing here, there are a couple of other episodes that we hosted here. In addition to the ones that you were on, Brad, we had Vincent Wright on episode 144 talking about chronologies. And that was, years ago. So stuff has happened since then. And then we had him back on episode 233 to talk about Helen Elizabeth Wilson, the first Sherlockian scholar. And I note that Ms. Wilson graces the cover of the Chronologist Guild handbook. So she's kind of like the patron saint of chronologies.
Well, we had another good friend of ours, Madeline Kionis, come up with that drawing from the one picture we have of her that was in a college yearbook or something. I think Vincent found it in. Mm. So, she graces the cover. She's actually, if we want to get real technical, she's like the second chronologist of Sherlock Holmes, because the first chronologist was Professor Moriarty, where he has those dates where Holmes messed with him in Final Problem. But we don't want to have him be our mascot, so we took her.
No, a good choice.
Fabulous.
So what's next on the chronologist timeline?
I don't know. The handbook was a big rush. We put that together in the month of February just because I had a wild idea that I wanted to put it out for Dayton. So, I've kind of been taking a breather since then, and we got to get back to basics, I think, in the coming year in the newsletter. And because there's Bruce Harris is always coming up with stuff, and there's little things like dates being different in the original manuscript than when it was printed, and we explore all that kind of stuff. So it's like I kind of just see what comes along, and we head down that rabbit hole when we get to it, and then the next rabbit hole.
Brad, is there any holy grail other than Watson's Wives? But is there any holy grail like manuscripts we haven't seen where there might be dates because we know dates were changed in publication or something like that?
Oh yeah, there's always the manuscripts. There is actually one. I forget who it is, but there is one older long gone Sherlockian who wrote a chronology. Somebody else read that chronology, and it's gone. We don't know where it wound up, or if anybody actually has it on a shelf somewhere or something. But we know it existed, and I can't remember the name of that fellow. But yeah, there is a missing chronology out there that got written up.
I think you mentioned that in the handbook. There were only a couple was privately printed, that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think there was one that never even quite got. It was like the Baker Street Press was going to print it, but then something happened. I forget what it was, but yeah, it's been going on so long. It's like everything else in Sherlock. There's all kinds of things we know about and things we don't know about that we're always looking for.
Well, folks should be on the lookout for that. There's a hole there in the space-time continuum. Need to repair that. Well, Brad, we know you have taken some time out of your schedule at 221 Beacon. We do appreciate that. We'll let you get back to the fun. In the meantime, folks can find you at Sherlock Peoria on Blogspot. We'll have a link to your blog as well as to your book, Holmes in an Hour or Two. Folks should pick that up if they want to have some fun. And again, sign up for the Chronologist Guild newsletter. Brad, thanks for being on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Oh, you're very welcome. Always glad to do it.
Well, I'm reminded, thanks to Brad and thanks to his handbook, of a quote about chronology from Bill Cochran, who said, "The beauty of Sherlockian scholarship is that any one person may be right. Chronology is no exception."
I like that. So there's hope for any of us, really.
Yeah. That's right. A lot of fun.
I haven't joined the Chronologist Guild up until this time. I've just kind of observed from the outside, but with this handbook that you returned with, and now with Brad's discussion about this card deck that he created that was available through the newsletter, I thought, well, it's about time. It's about time I joined.
It's time I became a chronologist.
Shouldn't that be the Chronologist Guild slogan? It's about time.
It's about time. Yeah.
Oh, that theme music can mean only one thing. That's right. It's time for Canonical Couplet, a Sherlockian quiz show where we give you 2 lines of poetry and you tell us which Sherlock Holmes story it is that we are talking about. If you were around here in episode 308, you may recall that we gave you this clue. This lengthy narrative of labor ructions includes our Sherlock's very best deductions. Bert,
Yes.
do you know which story the labor disunion happened in?
Oh, I sure do. Holmes is approached by a very troubled client, Hilton Cubitt, and he's mystified about his wife and her strange activities. She's trained a chicken to tap out a secret code. It's the case Watson called the dancing hen.
Ay, ay, ay. No. No. And I'm not going to dwell on this for too long. I'm going to go right over to our friend Eric Deckers to our rescue. Eric says, yoicks, I think I've solved it. It's the story of the time Sherlock Holmes, posing as a rapscallion from the city, meets Juliet, a wealthy young woman from Vermissa Valley. They're from different worlds and try to find love, even as Sherlock and Watson solve John Douglas's murder. It's the story Watson called The Valley Girl of Fear. Except I think I just confused this with everyone's favorite Nicolas Cage movie, and this is just really The Valley of Fear. Yes, Eric, well done once again. So you completely rescued yourself in that instance. Yeah, we were looking for The Valley of Fear. Sorry, you missed the mark again, Bert. But the good news is we have a number of other people who didn't miss the mark. So we are going to bring out the prize wheel and give it a big spin, watching it go around here as we wait for the fateful number to land on number 12. Oh, number 12. And it looks like that is Christopher Yule. Christopher, thank you and congratulations to you. We'll have a prize sent out to you in the mail. I think our prize last time was just an item from our iHose vaults. This time around, for this canonical couplet, we are going to have a copy of the limited edition, the Sherlockian Chronologist Guild Handbook. At least I'm assuming there's a few copies laying around. If not, I'm sure Brad would love to give you a copy of Holmes in an hour or two. Well, we will give it to you, but it'll be through Brad. So, stay tuned and see if you can try your hand at this clue. The way a cow-like girl was taken in bids us beware of our kith and kin. If you know the answer to this canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If you are among all of the correct answers and we choose your name at random, you'll win. Good luck. Well, Bert, I don't know how we do it.
Me neither. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. Mostly because I hide the editing process from you.
Oh, thank goodness.
I shield you from that painful experience.
Oh, well, years ago, I did the editing. I still have some Scotch tape left over if you need it.
Unfortunately, I don't have any Scotch left because that's all used up during the editing process.
Oh, dear.
So, folks, if you'd like to send in some Scotch to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere to help lubricate the process, we would, of course, be... I'm kidding. That would be great, though. Way better than Patreon or Substack. Scotch delivery.
Scotch delivery. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. I'll split it with you.
Yeah. You're going to wind up with, Chateau Thornycroft blend.
Well, Julian Wolfe years ago did one of his really tiny pamphlets. It's like about 3 by 4, and it was called A Case of Scotch.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, but I don't know if I have that in my collection. Do you remember what it was about?
No.
Was it actually about alcohol or?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, no, I've seen it. I'm sure I don't have it. If I ever did have it, I don't think I have it now, but I've certainly seen it. These things pop up every once in a while. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? All the little publishing things that have happened over the years. This is it's really great. People just take their interests and take some time and put out these pamphlets, and that's kind of what Brad has done, with chronology. It's just really great.
Oh, sure. Here, I have my copy of A Case of Scotch.
Oh, good for you.
I just pulled it off the shelf. It's in the same, I didn't see it before because it's in the same packet as A Ramble in Bohemia. Let's see. Case of Scotch. It belonged to Owen Frisbee. I believe he was a member of the Speckled Band. Oh, look at that. Duggan's Dew of Kirkintilloch. it looks like it is an advertisement for Duggan's sketched out there. Being a reprint from the reminiscences of J.W.M.D., late of the Army Medical Department. Before now, a majority of my readers are not even aware that Sherlock Holmes, at the urgent request of a certain personage in high places, returned to Baker Street and resumed his practice for a few years between the two great wars. It was during this era of so-called peace that the incident I am about to narrate occurred. Oh, and it's just a short little pastiche.
Oh, really? It's a pastiche, eh?
Yeah. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's pages and pages long, but it's written in Scotch dialect.
That gets old pretty quickly.
Yeah. It is really hard to read. Holmes and I looked at each other. Well, Watson, said he, if you ever do see fit to chronicle this episode, you might refer to it as the adventure of the drunkenest man in London. Here the manuscript ends, but someone has added an appendix in another hand. On reaching the bottom of the staircase, Mr. Glencannon stood up and took his bearings. He was surprised to find that he still had the bottle, and that both he and it were intact. It was 1/4 full, but he soon remedied that. Then he carefully placed the empty container on the floor just inside the doorway while he muttered, I wouldn't have had them think I was the dishonest man that would take their property. After the decanter had been arranged to his satisfaction, he made a starboard turn into Baker Street and proceeded on an irregular course. Blah, blah, blah. Finally, the imprint was brought into focus. Joe and Sid Crocker, Beer, Ale, and Spirits, East India, Dock Road, London, East 14. Jewelry bought, no questions asked. We end with a further examination revealed that he had not been looking at the face of the watch, but at an inscription on its back. Presented to Chauncey Montgomery by the International League of Militant Teetotalers. Well, that is quite a case. So, folks, if you go in search of this rarity of Julian Wolfe's case of Scotch, don't be disappointed when you do finally discover it. All right, Bert. Well, so much for our ramble in Bohemia.
Yeah, so much. Absolutely.
And I guess we'll wrap it up here. This is the, I don't even know, completely scotched Scott Monty.
I'm the chronologically challenged, always late Bert Wolder.
And together, we say, the game.
Yeah, that thing. The game. Yeah, that's it. Foot.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.